Speaking Moistly.
All right. Welcome to Speaking Moistly. Thank you for joining us. And today my guest host is Kelly. How are you doing, Kelly?
I'm not doing too bad. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing very well. As usual, very well. I'm enjoying the weather outside. It's a little cooler than it has been here. And it is the end of the school year, which means nothing.
COVID.
Yay.
Everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's just another day, really,
Yeah.
for the children that don't go to school anymore.
Yep. Well, every day has become one day. And I mean, like, I'm a big proponent of the perfect day. I work from home, so I set my own day and I set my own hours. And I work a lot. I'm up at 5. I like to work. Like, I'm not saying I don't work. But I set up my perfect day. So I work when I want and I do other things when I want. And the kids have fallen into it really well. So I don't know what's going to happen when this whole school thing kicks back off. I'm not sure.
Yeah, the brave new world that we're entering.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's beautiful and hot out here. I'm
good.
loving every second of it. I do not complain about heat very often. So
Yeah.
except we don't have air conditioning, so there is that. But
As long as it's cool at night. That's the
Yes,
real.
get the fans going.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't complain. It's bloody cold here in the winter, so I'll take some heat.
I hear you. All right, let's move into the news and the discussion. There was a letter circulated earlier this week. I'll read this to you. The people who wrote a letter cite a legal opinion published earlier this week by Toronto-based lawyer Brian Greenspan. I wonder, like, if Brian Greenspan knows Katie Telford by any chance. I don't know. I'm just saying. You
never
for
know. I mean,
reasons.
do some digging. Reasons.
Anyway, so the letter is urged Justin Trudeau to release Meng, to interfere politically in the case, release Meng, and maybe, if we cross our fingers and hope real nice, the Chinese will, in kind, release the two Michaels back to Canada. And they say, otherwise they're destined to spend their lives in a 10 by 10 cell and they're never going to leave again. Justin Trudeau today rejected that idea, and he said, quote, "If countries around the world, including China, realize that by arbitrarily arresting random Canadians, they can get what they want out of Canada politically, well, that makes an awful lot more Canadians vulnerable to that kind of pressure." And for once, I agree with Trudeau. I'm glad that he didn't. It's the only move, really. You can't just say to these 19 signatories, okay, we'll release her, sure, sounds good, go. I guess you could, but I don't think people would be on board with that. What do you think, Kelly?
Yes, I'm with you. I don't want to admit it, but I do agree with Trudeau on this one as well. We were chatting a little before the show, and just those words. If you did this, they could release them.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, based on what, I guess, is my question. What are we basing that assumption on? Are we basing it on past trusts? If that's the case, I would argue there's a lot of broken trust. So I'm not entirely sure, what the answer is, but I do agree that, yeah, this is sort of just a slippery slope if you start going down that road. So yeah, for once, I do have to say that I think he's kind of going in the right direction.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's not give too much credit. Hold on. Let's on this one. Okay.
Any other way.
Yeah, I was gonna say let's narrow that focus down a little bit.
Down thumbs everywhere. Just coming up. Yeah.
Ouch. Okay, but I mean, there isn't another move, and I think it's big enough news to make the top of this. It's important when you look at the context to not. I mean, poke the U.S. in the eye in favor of China. I think that there's a lot of, Canada's got a long history with the United States, and doing what the letter suggests is dangerous and not traditionally how Canada would govern and would choose to move. So it seems really odd.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a demonization of America so much lately. You see it in the media, and I know they mostly focus on Trump, but there is sort of this narrative that is, and you see it a lot just kind of reflected in public, I guess, discussion, people really accusing Americans of America, pew, 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 and there's just sort of these redneck assumptions, or they're so about freedom and the Constitution that they don't care about compassion. There's all these kind of insane theories that people believe. They believe with all their heart that Canada is this righteous, moral, polite, wonderful, amazing, perfect country, and then the Americans are a bunch of whatever, I don't know, insert whatever word you want. And it's really sad because I grew up 20 minutes from the American border. I spent a lot of time in the States growing up, and I have a great appreciation for for America, I have it in my background, and my husband has it in his background. So we both have American blood, I guess. And I guess I've always appreciated so much about them. And even though we're different, then there's always been a good relationship, and I don't want to see that broken. And I've been seeing it deteriorate since Trudeau came in, and the contrast of how Trudeau runs a country versus how Trump runs a country is so distinct that they clash. And obviously there's one that I prefer over the other. And as I said earlier, it's not Trudeau's way. But you see this deteriorating relationship. So in this instant, if we were to oust the U.S. in this way, it would be bad news bears.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And there's, I mean, with trade, I mean, like the headwinds are really, really difficult with regards to trade, with regard to like softwood, with regards to steel, aluminum. But then you look at China as well. And I mean, China's in an economic war with the United States right now, like a trade war, and they're losing. And I mean, that was before COVID. So now everything's kind of up on its head. Small businesses are being decimated. Walmart's posting, good profits. There's all sorts of really crazy stuff that's happened in 2019. And yeah, I mean, you're right. The further driving that wedge between Canada and the United States, the almost like, well, look at what Gerald Butts put out the other day, right? Like the crazy map thing he put out on Twitter. Did you see this?
I did not see that. I saw a reference to it as I was scrolling, but I didn't look into it. Taking a few days off Twitter in the beautiful sun. There's no time for the phone when it's 25 degrees out.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Well, it was a map that had like a picture of the United States, and it had like, all basically Christians, Iraq down for Florida, and like it was tasteless, really. And I thought, like, I'm not going to give this play, and I purposely ignored it because I thought, he's an advisor to the Prime Minister, but I'm not going to give this stupid, childish prank, really, that's really meant to just poke the U.S. in the eye any airplay because it's stupid and childish. And so, it's frustrating on that regard of things.
Well, it doesn't benefit anybody. And, realistically, there's tension between the U.S. and China. If there is ever a massive war between the two of them, I mean, some people would argue there's already beginnings when it comes to sort of tech war and all that type of stuff that wasn't possible 100 years ago, that we don't see behind the scenes, right? And all this sort of geopolitical stuff that goes on that we don't even know about. There is that. But as far as like an actual war, if you're ever concerned about a war between China and the U.S., I honestly, have wondered where Canada would side with, and that kind of concerns me. I really do feel like we're at such a slippery slope tipping point with the U.S. that I feel like we're just going to end up really isolated. And I feel like sometimes Canadians, because our media is so pro-government and pro-Canada and so biased, that they just don't. There's this, I think I said it last week about Trudeau, that he sees himself in this sort of majorly inflated way in the world, and no one else sees him like that. Canada's always been widely respected for a lot of reasons, and I feel like we're slowly losing a lot of that. And I feel like we're just going to kind of hide into nothingness if we don't. We're going in the wrong direction. We're siding with the wrong people. We're pointing out the wrong bad guys, and so to see something like this, it's interesting because I'll be watching closely in the next few days to see kind of where this goes and what the reaction is like. Everything just feels like at any moment, chaos could erupt from anything. Everything's just on a tension wire right now, right? With riots and trade and COVID, and it's just any little thing, any drop in this bucket could just change everything. So it's, I don't know, this is big stuff, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, like it is. I mean, that's the old saying, like, if you live in interesting times, it's not such a blessing, right? Like, wish you live in boring times, but these are interesting times, and what's happening is fast and moving quickly, and like the rest of the world is responding to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is of a force in and of himself, regardless of whether you agree with him or disagree with him. It doesn't matter if you care. It's like the virus. It doesn't matter if you believe it. The economic impact is real. The impact of Trump is real, whether you like him or not. And the amount of people who just can't see what he's doing, or can't see past the media or anything to that effect. I mean, how can you look at a media that tells you? I've seen a bunch of media reports talking about how the big rallies didn't spread any COVID-19, and of course the Black Lives Matter rallies didn't. But I'm waiting for the ones that say that the Trump rallies did, right? Or the anti-lockdown protests that get broken up by police, et cetera, and people arrested. So I think that the juxtaposition of those two things is really interesting, right? Like you get to watch people really lose their mind for one, and then the other one is you would be, evil not to go because you don't support the cause. And it's like, what?
Right. No, there's a hypocrisy of insane proportions when it comes to that kind of coverage. And I mean, the media coverage of all of it and the types of protests that occurred before all this. So people that were wanting to shut down the lockdown. In other words, reopen. Those people were shunned and shamed, right?
Yahoos.
All of this, right? And there were certain times right towards the beginning, there was a couple of marches I felt were kind of silly, and they were just being really, I don't know, it was more the way it went down as opposed to the point of it. But there was a lot of just regular people. I appreciated Rebel for that. They went out to all of these protests in Toronto and really talked to the people, and they were just normal Canadians that had very real concerns. But then when you get into the media coverage of it, they just made everybody look like, well, they always manage to paint everything as far right now. So I guess that's just, the new narrative is the extreme far right, and now you can lump in COVID opinions into that too for your nice narrative, and yet thousands of people can gather for a riot because it's deemed an okay cause. All of a sudden, well, that's fine. And it's really bothering me because now it's reaching beyond bias, and it's actually ignoring what will likely be scientific facts, because you can't tell me that one rally is going to cause an infection and one won't. If that's the case, it just doesn't make sense. So
right, but
it doesn't have political beliefs. It doesn't pick and choose. Oh, you're a liberal, you're safe.
But what if it does though? What if it does though? Because here's the thing. Here's the thing though. When you control the newspapers, when you control history, so 5 years from now, when they look back at the history, the newspapers are the paper of record, right? Like there's nobody else writing down what's happening. So when they go back in the New York Times and say, what was happening then? Oh, everybody was racist. Oh, okay. Or 5 years ago, not so much, right? So if you control that, it doesn't matter if the virus, like you've seen the Google trick, new cases, like 333, 220, right? You've seen this. So
I tried a whole bunch of numbers, and I know the theory of, well, there's so many places and it's affected so many people, you're bound to have one article for each, but I don't know.
That's a really easy little programming trick to write whatever number they do, return. Right.
Very spooky, very weird. Just there's so many things like that. If one thing was on its own, I always say that, people tinfoil hat. Well, if one thing on its own, maybe, and there's some pretty weird dots people try to connect that really can't be connected, but there's a lot of weird patterns. And if you pay attention, it's weird, as a certain YouTuber I know
it is weird.
It's weird.
It is weird. It's so weird. I'm going to get a mug. I swear I'm getting a mug. Just going to say it's weird.
It's weird, man. It's weird.
It is weird. So, okay, moving on. So that's the parliamentary stuff still. There is an Edmonton, just because you're further west, so I thought we'll go further west. There's an Edmonton school trustee, I covered this on my show this morning, who is resigning. She's resigning because she said that refugee children have never known school before they come to Canada, and sometimes they've only known violence. And sometimes when they come into the schools, they are violent. And she said this in a public meeting, and the public meeting went viral, and now she's stepping down. And I'm hearing that buzz again. I wasn't hearing it up until just like right now. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I don't know if you changed anything.
I didn't do anything. I haven't touched anything.
It's all good. Anyway, I'll continue. So the school trustee said removing the officer from the school is not based in evidence. The officer does a good work. They can respond quickly. They're there. And she said that she hoped that the motion didn't pass because she didn't want the officer to be removed from the school because she thought it was a benefit. And on the yin to this yang, there is a board close to me in Guelph that says any system built by white people is upholding white supremacy and therefore racist. And they don't nobody's being called to, step down or anything to that effect. Now, I don't think that this person should be stepping down either for speaking truth. But I think that it is interesting what is going on across our country with the inconsistencies, even with regards to speaking truth or talking about what is happening in our schools, the reality versus the narrative that they want you to believe or want to be talked about in the newspapers 5 years from now, or in polite company, right? Like, let's not talk about the uncomfortable realities of our world. Let's fire anybody who brings that up, right? And by the way, all systems are white supremacist unless they're explicitly not. Weird.
It's weird, yeah. And it's once you start to kind of look into, I guess, something I didn't understand a few years ago, which is postmodernism, and then of course critical race theory, and these are the things that all of this is based on. And unfortunately, these aren't things that are remotely kind of consistent with any other sort of method of how people see the world. And this is being now touted as sort of the new gospel of anything to do with race or intersectionality. And it's unfortunate because it's extremely divisive, and it's not some kind of extremely scientific way of looking at the world. It's a theory, and it's being completely shoved into schools. So you can have an opinion on controversial issues. You just have to have the right opinion, and you have to say it the right way. And if you say it the wrong way, then it doesn't matter whether you're in media like Stockwell Day, or whether you're like politics in media, or whether you're Wendy Mesley, or whether you're, it doesn't matter.
Canceled.
Canceled. And then in the school system, you can take that a step further, because now we're dealing with, when you cancel people, you bring in people that replace them with this specific ideology because they have the hiring practice to do that. And then the kids continue to learn that stuff. And then you have kids coming home and saying, my friend in Portland was telling me with everything that's going on down there, and her daughter said something that she ended up, it was really quite a racist thing to say about blacks, and she'd never heard her say something, and she asked where she heard that, and it was on this kid's YouTube channel, which is a left-wing kind of Marxist pushing channel for kids. And she found out all these stereotypes. They're trying to push kids to not have those negative stereotypes, but they were stereotypes that already the kids didn't have. Like, the kids were already pure enough. They already had no problem with the kids in their class that were from different places or had different skin colors. And they're creating this. They're creating the division. It's absolutely, she's appalled. She's leaving that whole area altogether. She said, Oregon's kind of falling. But when I see this stuff and I think about my nephew, it's awful. Where do you draw this line? Because it's just, you're hurting the kids' perception of themselves, their heritage, and the world around them based on what? On a theory? And it's really scary because it's happening all over.
Yeah, in real time, like from municipal governments to provincial governments. Look at Doug Ford's weak response to this whole thing. To like school boards, right? You can't have any. But I was going to say, where do you fight? You said your friend is running from Portland, so like Portland not good enough to fight for. I don't understand, and maybe this is the wrong time to fight. Who knows? But maybe it's going to take years to win, right? Maybe it's going to take a long time, and maybe this is closer to 1935 than it is to 1939. Who knows? Like with regards to the positioning of the political pieces. But at what point do you stand up and say, this far and no further, and instead of running away from the city? You know what I mean? Like I get it, because I'm looking at it too, but at the same time, and not looking at running away from Guelph necessarily, but like, where would you run to if you were to run? Where's better than here?
Well, this is just it. Not everybody can move to Hungary or Poland or someplace that's worrying about their sovereignty, or places that, people may prefer politically. You can't and not everyone can leave. Someone has to stick around and fight for their areas. And I mean, people have different reasons for moving, and if you're raising your kids and you want them to be in a different environment, I get that. So, but it's interesting because in Canada, you hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, just move to the States." Well, they're having their own issues. Europe is having their own issues. This is a global thing. This is a theory. This is ideology that's being pushed far beyond just in Canada. And even in our little conservative stronghold here in Saskatchewan, a lot of that stuff is still seeping in, and we're still seeing it. And there's all these different trainings available, and sometimes forced for work and government stuff, and you're seeing all the same divisive garbage. It's kids though; they're so vulnerable, and this just bothers me because it really does come down to brainwashing and propaganda, and that's not conspiracy theory stuff. This is they're teaching children how to see people based on race. Again, we're going backwards. I can't fathom how far we came, as a society, and we're going backwards. And it's always falling. That white people build only, supremacist systems. A lot of these systems that are being built now are solely with diversity in mind, or with affirmative action practices and different things like that. I mean, at what point can you just accept that some people are good and some people are bad in all races and go from there? It's really, racism is against any race. That's what the thing about critical race theory is. It's oppression and power stuff rather than just race. So you can't be racist against someone if they have white
Power.
skin because they have more oppression, or they have more power over you and you're oppressed. They're not the oppressed, they're the oppressor. So then therefore you can't be racist towards them.
Yeah.
Yes, of course you can.
I was going to say the whole theory is bullshit. Excuse my
is.
language. It's bullshit. But I wanted to say when I was talking about it on my show, I said, the teams built up as, white teams and blah, blah, blah. I've disseminated this whole thing. I've been thinking a lot about it. And so how big does the white team have to be? Does a single white person make a product that is inherently upholding white supremacy according to this? Or does it have to be a larger team? But when I was thinking about it, when I think about it in my head, I don't think of a team of people working together as a team of white people or a team of black people or a team of whatever. I think of a team of Canadians. We're a team of people working towards a goal at the end. And it doesn't matter to me what you look like. If you have purple hair and black skin, or black hair and white skin, or white hair and white skin, I don't care. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't. If you could do the job, I don't give a shit. But if you're there to put your skin color in my face the whole time and not doing the job, that's a problem. Get out of the way, man. Woman.
Yes, it's about having shared values, shared vision. If it's in a business, you have to have shared, agreements when it comes to your ethics, your morals, your efficacy. There's shared communities, and as long as people are in that community, whatever it might be, whether it's religious or whether it's like I said, business or school, that's what joins us. It's ideas, it's values. It's it's not skin color and quotas and. Like you said, people that hold that over you, or that race card they will pull out. I really don't see this being positive for anybody. And the thing is it makes me wonder, when you get offline in real life, how many people actually think like this in the way of what you would call sort of the woke SJW crowd? How many people actually think that way out there in the real world? And I don't know. People are too scared to say. That's the problem. And we're going back to kind of fighting for this sort of thing. I would love to see people just all stand up and get a feel for where this country actually is, but we don't even have people voting. It's so hard to tell where anybody is at because nobody wants to ruffle any feathers. They just want their comfortable life. And because we're not fighting with bombs in front of us and having to make split-second decisions, we're just going to stay comfortable and leave that politics stuff to someone else. And people aren't standing up. They're not speaking.
Well, they've been
very soft.
Yeah. Well, they've been disengaged. Part of it is too, this stuff takes time to look at the regulations. This stuff takes time. I mean, there was a time when it is a full-time job to run a household. It is a full-time job to make sure that, kids are fed, kids have got all the clothes they need, kids have been bathed, dinner's ready, dinner's out, something's thawing to, make sure it's ready to go. It is absolutely not a 5-minute at the end of the day, oh my goodness, it's 5 o'clock, or even get up early to do stuff before you have to leave for work. There's a reason that men would go out to work and women would stay home. And once you're engaged and involved in the community, if you've got kids and if you've got church, if you've got Board of Education, PTA meetings to go to, all of that stuff, that was a very fulfilling life in the 1940s and 50s, right? People in 60s and even into the 70s. And what has happened is that's been smashed in favor of stopping at KFC on the way home from the office, and then you stop at KFC, you pick up the kid from daycare, and then bath, bed, and we do it again tomorrow until COVID happened, right? So it's a really sinister way to destroy that kind of cohesive unit that was meant to enrich everybody, that was meant to be a stable place for the kids to grow up, a stable place for the wife to work, usually the wife, because they're more interested in the kids. Women are interested in kids, men are interested in things, right? That's just kind of a very broad general statement, but there's a reason the family structure is what it is. And it's just
I'm a big fan of traditional gender roles, something I bucked for years when I was more and now I've settled into that, really enjoying and appreciating the unique gifts that God's given us and how it balances out if you let it. And it doesn't mean that, like you said, women have to do this, men have to do that. My husband worked with the odd woman on the rigs, but over 12 years, I don't think there was more than maybe 10 that actually worked out on the rigs, with him. And that's not because women can't, it's because the percentage is small. They're outliers, right? They're not the norm. And that gets into all of, the pay stuff and everything. But this is all the stuff that's being taught in the school. So what's interesting is the kids are hearing a lot of stuff in school, and then they're coming home, and like you said, everyone's rushed and distracted, and we're on our phones, and no one's paying attention.
Yep.
They're not even getting a chance to get a second side of the story. Parents aren't sitting down with their kids and finding out what the curriculum is. They're not getting engaged to find out what, I've really been getting some of my non-political friends just to be aware that, okay, sure, you don't think politics affects you. What are your kids being taught in school about this or this? Oh, well, I don't know. Well, did you know this is part of the curriculum? Holy cow, is it really? Yes, it is. You really have to be aware, because otherwise this kid gets home, and then by the time they go to bed, they've only absorbed one side, and you haven't even provided then the grounding of another perspective, of the family perspective, and of course parental rights being removed, and the schools being given almost more of an authoritative power, it seems, has been another problem too. So if you put those things together, you shape children that aren't independent thinkers. You shape children that aren't well-rounded. They're not grounded, rooted. Family, a strong family structure is truly the cornerstone of strong communities, and therefore strong regions and countries and so on.
Well, it gives everybody purpose as well. Like, you understand what your role is. You understand what your but like, what you're supposed to do. But I want to talk just quickly about traditional roles. I worked in children's mental health for years. I started when I was like 18. I think I was one of the youngest hired at a couple of my places. And I worked in that field for more than a decade, and working with kids, working directly on the floor with children. And then being able to, and now I do the dishes. I do the cooking for my family. I spend a lot of time with my kids. I do I call it the programming, just because I'm institutionalized from my years of running the institution, right? But it's like, you've got to have your week planned out. You got to know what you're going to do. Kids thrive with clear expectations. And
routine and discipline are very important. This whole let's just be friends and hey, whatever, peace, love, and whatever, dude. It's not structure. Kids need structure, whether it's from whichever parental role, traditional or not. They definitely need it. And like you said, it's work. It's keeping a household is hard work, and it's good work, satisfying work.
Yep. Yeah, and it is, and it's a lot of fun, and I've had a lot of fun with my kids, and I wouldn't necessarily say that the rigidity of the 1950s is preferable, but they had certain things right, and they did certain things right, and they didn't have the anxiety we've got today. They didn't have the uncertainty we've got today. They didn't have the kids running around saying absolutely crazy things and not focusing on the real problem of life, which is like, you got to live in your body, man. You got to, like, this is like it, right? Like, until it's gone, this is it, right? And people don't take care of it. And I mean, it's
really just not teaching resilience. Unfortunately, we've taught kids that it's okay if you're offended, then everybody has to change around you, and that just isn't how real life works. Life is struggling, as Jordan Peterson says. You really do have to find a way to work through it. Yeah.
And I mean, life is. It's a struggle, but you've got to be willing to meet the struggle and like enjoy it almost, right? Like, that's what I mean. My perfect day. Yeah. I try for my perfect day every day. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to leave it, right? Like,
sure.
I think so. All right. Well, thank you for joining me, Cal. Maybe next week.
Potentially, yes.
All right.
Week. I don't know. Possibly next week. I might be getting photographs for this website of my cousin's new business. So Steve and I are going to be models for the first time, and our dog. So potentially having to travel, but we'll keep posted. And if I'm around, I'll be here. So
sounds good. Cool.
Cool.
And for the viewers, we'll see you guys Tuesday likely. And thanks for watching. Play us out. Where's the Prime Minister? Oh goodness. Here we go.
Speaking moistly, keep 2 meters apart. Speaking moistly. Speaking moistly.
Oh, where's my mouse then?